So we found ourselves in a bit of a situation here. You're a B2B marketer or founder, and you want to use LinkedIn as part of your go-to-market motion, but for whatever reason, it's just not converting. Your audience isn't growing as quickly as you'd like, and the audience that you have built isn't converting into leads or ultimately buyers. So what's going on here? The good news is the answer and the fixes aren't that complicated. And based on my experience working with founders in this exact situation or companies in this exact situation, there are usually 5 things we can trace this back to. So I'll walk you through those 5 mistakes in this video and show you how to troubleshoot each one of them. The first mistake we need to fix is that posting volume is simply not high enough. A lot of marketers and founders drastically underestimate the amount of volume that's needed to succeed on LinkedIn, especially as a newer account. So once you're established, you can sort of skew in the direction of quality over quantity. But especially when you're first ramping up, you need to get in front of people often. People don't know who you are. They don't have that trust built with you yet. So posting once a week, or I actually had a conversation with a founder recently where they wanted to post once or twice a month and test LinkedIn. I was like, that's just not going to work. So you need to have high posting frequency, but also not high enough that it's overwhelming or just overkill or people think you're on social all day. So what is that sweet spot? How do we troubleshoot this? My simple advice here is post once per day on weekdays. So Monday through Friday, post once per day. For bonus points, post on Saturday and Sunday. It can work. Saturday is usually slow. Sunday's hit or miss, but Monday through Friday, you should be posting to the LinkedIn timeline. No brainer. So with posting cadence once per day on weekdays, that'll get you 95% of the way there. Now, the second mistake I see all the time from B2B companies on LinkedIn is going way too broad with their content or going way too narrow with their content. So 2 different variations of the same problem here. The one I see more often from B2B founders is going too narrow. So they'll only post case studies or feature highlights or feature announcements. And those are all great content assets to include. I would highly recommend having those in your rotation. The tricky part here is those are more bottom of funnel. So they speak to a segment of your audience that already knows your product. They're probably considering buying anyway. And that's great. But once you exhaust that small group of bottom of funnel followers that you have initially, so once you start posting on LinkedIn, you'll probably have a group of followers that know your company as it is, and they might convert into buyers. But once you convert that group, you don't have any more bottom of funnel followers to speak to. Think of it like a room of people that you're selling to. That room isn't filled with high intent people anymore. And if you're only posting that bottom of funnel content, you're essentially speaking to no one at this point. So you need a type of content that's also going to fill that room. And I'll get to that in a second. But the mistake here is only posting feature heavy or product heavy content in a way that doesn't speak to a broader audience that attracts new people in. The other side of this problem is going too broad. So this often happens when founders start consuming content from like these LinkedIn growth gurus that are getting like 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 likes on a post, but it's all super broad content, like general startup advice or general business advice. Or my favorite is when people start making content about how to grow on LinkedIn and they grow quickly on LinkedIn because they're posting content about how to grow on LinkedIn. It's a whole pyramid scheme. What happens with this is you post this sort of broad content and you get a lot of people engaging, you get a lot of likes, comments. You might even see your follower count go up pretty quickly, but it's sort of a false signal because none of these people that are coming into your audience are going to be ideal customers for your niche B2B SaaS product. And if you're only posting this super broad business startup oriented content, you're going to build this large, low intent audience, which is almost as bad as having no audience at all. The way we troubleshoot this is by building out a content funnel. I have an entire video where I walked through how to do that, so I'll link that up here. But the TLDR is that you want different content types that speak to people at different stages in the funnel. So you want broad content that brings new people in. And then you want middle of funnel content to build authority and build you as a thought leader in your specific niche. So if you're an email marketing SaaS founder, you might put out content about email marketing or the D2C industry or stuff like that. And then you want bottom of funnel content like those case studies, feature highlights that convert that audience into either buyers or email subscribers or something like that. But each stage is necessary. And a lot of founders, to kind of sum up this mistake, over index on one specific stage of that funnel. Now, the third mistake that I see a lot on LinkedIn is the desire to sound super professional or be an authority. And yeah, we want to build you as an authority in your niche, but that doesn't mean that your posts need to have a ton of jargon or specific technical terms. And this depends a little bit on the industry. So certain industries this works better for than others. But generally speaking, you can probably be a bit more casual with your tone of voice and add more of your personality. You don't need to be this corporate robot, this very sterile sounding entity on LinkedIn. That's not going to convert. It's not going to build a relationship with your audience. And it's just not going to be that engaging. Like, think about the content that you engage with individually as you're scrolling LinkedIn, or even expanding beyond LinkedIn, scrolling Twitter or scrolling the Instagram feed. Think about the content that you engage with. It's usually not the super corporate, technical, jargon filled content that you see a lot of people post on LinkedIn, but they want to sound smarter to their audience because they think that, oh, if I sound smarter, then everyone's going to buy it from me. That's usually not true. Obviously, you don't want to take this too far in the other direction. There's a spectrum here, just like the last mistake. You don't want to go too broad or too narrow. In this case, you don't want to go too corporate, but you also don't want to go too casual to the point where decision makers at, say, like enterprise companies would look at your content and think like, do we want to do business with them? There's definitely a sweet spot here, and I can make a video on this in more detail. It's going to just depend on your company, your niche, et cetera, et cetera. But my point here is, before I start rambling, don't be too corporate with the way you write. Write like you would on any other social media platform, and I think you'll be in a good spot. And a note here before we move on to the next thing, with tone of voice, just write how you want to write. If that is a little bit more technical or a little bit more academic, because that's your personality, that's fine. Or that's your founder's personality, that's fine. It's not a bad thing. If you write more casual or more like free flowing and that's your personality, lean into that. My point here is don't try to be someone you're not because you think that a LinkedIn audience is going to buy from you because you sound smarter, or you sound more academic or corporate, because usually it's the opposite. They're going to trust you and engage with you because your content is more like approachable and engaging. And real quick, before we get into mistake number 4 in this video, if you're new around here and you want to learn more about how to use content and organic social as part of your go-to-market motion as a B2B SaaS company, drop a subscribe on this video. I post stuff like this every week. So if you find this helpful, stick around for more. Now, mistake number 4, being a ghost or posting and ghosting. Pretty straightforward here. And this is pretty much the idea of, like, you have your post drafted, you log in, you hit publish, and then you log out and just don't engage with anyone. And I get why founders do this. They don't want to waste time, or what they perceive as wasting time, on LinkedIn. And I'm not advocating that you spend all day commenting or messaging people or engaging on LinkedIn. You have other things to do as a founder, or if you're a marketer, if you're a marketing leader at a B2B SaaS company, you have other things to do besides comment on people's LinkedIn posts. Like, if I look on the timeline, I seriously wonder how some of these people have so much time in their day to just comment on every single post, whether it be on LinkedIn or on X. It blows my mind. So I'm not advocating that you do that. There are other way higher leverage tasks that you can do besides just commenting. That said, posting and ghosting, so not engaging at all, is also a pretty bad mistake to make, and I wouldn't recommend it. This is especially true if you are just starting to build an audience. So if you already have an audience built, so maybe from a previous company, or just for whatever reason, you have a sort of a base that follows you and engages with your stuff already, maybe you have the luxury of not having to do this. But if you're starting from scratch, it is best practice to spend at least some time every day engaging with people. Most importantly, whoever engages on your posts, so if people comment on your piece of content, reply back, engage with them, reward that behavior, so then they come back and comment again and engage again and share your stuff again. If people comment on your stuff enough times and they see that you're just not responding, or you're not someone who engages, they're not going to continue to engage with you. So number 1 priority here is, at the very minimum, engage with people who are engaging with your content. Now, as far as what I call outbound engagement, so going and finding relevant accounts in your niche to comment on, this is a strategy that I see a lot of people take way too far. This is how you end up spending 2, 3, 4 hours a day on LinkedIn just commenting on people's stuff. And I get it. I get what they're trying to do. But 1, it's just a waste of time. 2, it sort of comes across as like, okay, this person is just on this platform all day. Do they actually get any work done? So you don't want to go that far. But what I would recommend is spend like 15 minutes a day just going to a few key accounts that you want to build a relationship with or get in front of, and comment on their posts, especially if they post very often. Just go show some love. These should be people that you would engage with anyway. You don't want to spam comment or spam engage. The way I like to think about this is, imagine you're going to a conference and there's a person there, or a group of people that you want to meet and start a conversation with. Maybe it's a potential partner, an investor, a customer, or an account that you have your eye on. You wouldn't just go to that conference and stand in the the corner and hope that they eventually come up and talk to you for whatever reason, because that's not going to happen. You have to go actively seek the person out that you want to talk to and initiate that conversation yourself. The same thing applies on social media. If there's a group of people that you want to engage with your stuff, especially if you're starting from scratch and don't have authority built up in that niche already, you have to go out and initiate that conversation yourself. And the way that looks is you find their content on LinkedIn and you start liking it, showing some love on it. And again, this is not spamming. You only do this if you actually appreciate the content they put out. And over a long enough time horizon of genuine engagement with this person, they'll probably reciprocate, whether it's responding to your comment on their post, or maybe they follow you back, maybe they shoot you a message or respond to your DM. But this is why it's so important to not just post and ghost and actually go out and initiate conversation. And like I said earlier, it doesn't have to take 4 hours of your day. It shouldn't. Really spend 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes a day doing this. I don't spend that much time doing it. This is sort of a sliding scale. You can spend a little bit longer if you want, but all it takes is 15, 20 minutes of dedicated engagement on key accounts. And I think you'll be surprised by how much momentum you can create. But just don't post and ghost. Now, the fifth mistake that I see all the time is founders and marketers of these startups are just simply impatient. They don't understand how long it takes to build an audience, and more importantly, build an audience that genuinely trusts you and is willing to buy from you. If you're starting from scratch here, it's going to take some time. Now, if you're starting from a position again where maybe you have an audience already that's built within your niche that you're selling to, that's fantastic. But if you're starting more or less from scratch, it's going to take time to build trust with your audience. And it's important that you have the appropriate expectation going into organic social and LinkedIn specifically as a channel when it comes to timeline. If we work with a client at our agency, the expectation is that we're at least testing this for 90 days. Now, we should see results in those 90 days. It's not just like, oh, we're going to test, and if nothing happens, oh, well. It's like we know enough that we can get results in those 90 days. But it doesn't happen in a week. It doesn't happen in 2 weeks. And in some cases, it takes longer than others. So sometimes we start and it's like, oh, 1 week in, we're getting leads already. Sometimes it takes a month or two to find or really hit a groove. It really just depends. But in a lot of cases, I think founders and marketers at these companies have a false sense of expectations around how quickly they should grow an audience. And I think why this happens is there's a lot of sort of shady stuff that happens in like the audience growth and content ecosystem, whether it's like paid engagement or like there's these pods where people will pay like a certain amount per month for someone to comment on their, it's insane. And I'm not going to go too deep into that stuff right now, but if you're trying to build an actual audience of real people that are high intent and willing to buy from you and trust your opinion in your industry, it takes time. And there really is no way to fast track trust. The good thing is it doesn't take a large audience of like 10,000 or 100,000 or a million people to generate a lot of pipeline for your company. Like I have a client right now that on Twitter, and then as we're talking about LinkedIn right now, but this applies on Twitter and X as well. He has like 1,000 or 1,200 followers, and it's not like a massive audience, but he can get in touch with anyone that he needs to in his industry using his Twitter, whether it's customers, partners, investors, and it doesn't take a massive audience. But the reason he's been able to do that with such a small, concentrated group of people is because he's gone about it in a way, or we've gone about it in a way that's purely organic and just putting the reps in with building trust. So if you're on LinkedIn right now and you're wondering like, why is this not happening? Has it only been a week or two? Has it only been a month? If so, a lot of the times the answer is just keep going. And again, that's not to say that you shouldn't see any momentum. If you're not seeing any changes in your content or like increase in follower count or your impressions aren't going up, and if none of that is happening, there are some things that you want to fix. A lot of what we talked about earlier in this video. But as long as you're being mindful of the 4 other mistakes that we talked about, don't make the 5th mistake, which is just rushing the process. You don't need a massive audience to generate pipeline for your company, and you'll get there eventually. So let me know if that makes sense. If you enjoyed this, again, drop a like down below. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I'm going to put a video up on screen right now that runs through the full system we use at our agency to build personal brands for B2B startup founders. If you want to check that out, give it a watch, and hope you enjoy.